Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll be talking about attention. And what does attention has to do with the senses? Well, hopefully in 40 minutes I'll be able to explain you why you have to study attention if you have to focus on the senses. If you're interested in what the senses are and what we pick up of the world around us, how we explore our environment, you have to know about attention. But before I do that, because we're going to spend time together, 45 minutes, I thought it was a good idea to tell you a little bit of something about myself and about the car that I just bought. And I'm an experimental psychologist, so I put this car in the center of the street. Here it is in blue. And I asked, does it attract attention? Do people find this car actually interesting? So I put it in the center of the street. It was an English-like looking street, but perhaps I should have chosen another street because it wasn't really busy. Finally, there was somebody entering the scene. Let's see whether this person actually pays attention to my car. She doesn't. You might realize by now that something's going on with this movie. Of course, it's flickering all the time. That's correct. But you also might have noticed that things are changing. Well, not some things are changing. Everything is changing in this movie. So we're going to illustrate the changes that you perhaps missed. Some of them you might have catched, but I'm pretty sure you didn't catch on all these different changes that were there in the scene. So we're going to see how it started, the whole scene, and then we're going to go. So this is what the initial movie was, the initial picture. And here you're going to see all the changes. So cars changed, houses have changed. There were all this material that wasn't there. The scooter changed into a bicycle and all these other things. And actually, these changes are quite big. And most of the time, you don't notice them. And this is because attention exists. This is because we select part of our environment for further selection. And only the things that we select on, only the things that we attend to, that is what we pick up on our environment. And the remaining of the environment is simply ignored. And I might think, well, that doesn't happen in daily life. Well, it does. So this is a famous real-life example. You can do this experiment easy on the streets. Somebody's talking to someone. There's a change of identity. And this person that is explaining the road simply doesn't notice that this person now changed identity. Here's another one. This person is explaining the road. There's a completely new person after the change. And the person just keeps on talking. And I might wonder, oh, this is awful. I'm so limited. And I think one of the things that I would like to stress today is this is actually a really efficient strategy. We don't need to explore or process everything in our environment. We only need to process the information that is relevant. So you cannot assume that if you present visual information, auditory information, that your listener or your observer will pick up on that information. No, only if the information becomes relevant. Because this is our daily world. Every moment in time, we are bombarded with an enormous visual and auditory and tactile and what type of information. And if you would process all that information at once, you have to be brains that are like 10 or 20 times bigger. So our brain is extremely efficient. Because you do not really realize that we only select part of that information. I have the impression that my world is full. I see all of you here. I have the impression that once I leave here, I have a full memory of what has happened in this room and what are all the different things that are present in this room. But the truth is that's not actually the case. In Holland, we are pretty good in designing roads. Thought through very well, except when we change things about the road. Then everything goes wrong. The whole system collapses. Then you see these awful types of signs. And these signs are, of course, not good, because you have to keep your attention on the road. Attention is efficient, and attention is limited, scarce. So every attention that you have should be focused on the relevant things. And if you want to bring about information, if you want to communicate, you have to do it such that's efficient and that's congruent with how attention works. And this, of course, is not. And good road designers always tell us that a well-designed road doesn't need any signs. It has to explain itself, because we do not have the time to look at signs. It has to explain itself, self-explaining roads. So I've been doing this with my hand. Why? Well, the reason is that we use attention, the analogy that we use is as a spotlight. I'm now on the spotlight, and this is, of course, because we want you to focus your attention on me. And this is why they put a spotlight on me. This analogy works really nice because of this. Because somebody could change somewhere over there where there's no spotlight, and you wouldn't notice it. The spotlight travels through space. Also, our attentional spotlight travels through space. We focus on this part of the scene, then we focus on the other part of the scene. And we can also have different sizes of the spotlight. And the size of the spotlight is a very important determinant of what type of information you actually are aware of. Because, hey, you have to be able to access that information in order to know that the information is there. So in this definition, attention is a prerequisite for awareness. So when you're in a supermarket and you want to know where the milk is, you are changing the size of your spotlight. So for instance, assume you're in a new supermarket and you don't really know where the cooling is, where the cooling section is. So what you don't want is a very small spotlight. You don't want to focus on details. You want to focus on the rough outline of the supermarket and localize the cooling. And once you're in front of the cooling, you make your spotlight really small, and now you can go for the details. So imagine a situation where you have a very small spotlight. You will know exactly the price of the pack of cookies that is standing in front of you, but you wouldn't have the overview. Small children don't have the overview yet. They have a small spotlight. When you get older, your spotlight decreases again. That's why when people get old and they're driving, they're mostly driving like this, because they don't seem to have the overview. I can demonstrate this. I think you haven't tried this before, increasing and decreasing a spotlight in these terms, but you do it all the time. When you're reading, you make your spotlight really small. And this creates a situation where you can read a book at Utrecht Central Station without being too much disturbed by information in your surroundings. So I'm not going to ask you to make your spotlight really large and focus on the rougher picture of this presentation. Well, hopefully what you've noticed is that this is a large letter, and now you know the identity of this large letter. You might have also noticed something else, but you will be able to better notice this when I'm going to ask you to make your spotlight really small. So now make your spotlight really small and only focus on this particular aspect of the screen. Really, really focus on the details. What you now be able to see is that this was a large letter constituting of small letters. So large spotlight ensures a situation where you get the rough overview, and when you make the spotlight really small, that is when you get to details. So our eyes are not, what we're seeing is not a direct reflection of the eyes, right? This is one of the important things I would like to tell you. Our eyes are sensors, yes, but there's something behind those sensors. There's a selection filter. And sort of the rules of that selection filter determine what you will get, what you will perceive, what you will understand from what the sensors are picking up. So what captures our attention? If you want to convey, if you want to transform it, if you want to communicate information, how do you do this? Well, first of all, we are slaves of our environment, meaning that important information in our surroundings can capture our attention. What's important information? Important information is information that's salient, things that pop out, something that's different in terms of color, shape, of orientation, the basic building blocks of our perception. If one of those objects is different, that might automatically capture your attention. And this can create a situation where there's a reflex of your attention to a certain situation. We cannot control this. People sometimes ask me, how can I control this? I don't want to be distracted all the time. My answer is, please do not get rid of that possibility, of that capacity. First of all, you can't. Second of all, this is a survival principle, right? This is something that's new might be related to something that is important or even dangerous. If now somebody runs up the stage, you want your attention to be captured by that because that might be relevant. And this is something that works for us all. Of course, some people are more distractible than others, but this is a general principle that everything that is salient in your environment will automatically capture your attention. This is why fire trucks are red. When fire trucks were first on the road, they wanted to have a color that was very different from the other cars on the road. And yes, red was in that time a very good idea. These days, it's not anymore. So we have to come up with situations in order to make fire trucks and ambulance salient again, different from the rest of the environment. So they created a situation where you have these things on the side that are different than normal cars. And there have been experiments in America where they've changed the color. And you see that these cars actually are involved in less accidents than fire trucks that are red. And because, you noticed them earlier because they're different than the rest. And we now protect them. These colors and these forms of making them different than the rest are protected. This is not allowed in the Netherlands. So the animal ambulance had to change the outline of their car to make it look less similar than fire trucks and ambulances. You can use this information. So this is a question to you, whether you think this is a good advertisement. And let us assume that the goal of this advertisement is to bring about information about the company, about the brand. Well, as you can see, that isn't really salient. There are a lot of salient information here. You can do eye tracking in order to see where people put their attention. We'll talk about that a little bit later. What you can see is that the logo isn't salient. It's very difficult to find. So if you assume that people will make 3 to 4 shifts of attention before moving on to the next page, I think this is not a good commercial. This is a wonderful commercial. It has all the rules that I just talked about. It's salient, it's new, it's different from the environment. It's located at a position which is relevant for the commercial. And you will see that the first eye movement and therefore the first shift of attention, boom, will go to that logo. It has nothing to do with clothes, but hey, what's important here? I think this situation, Benetton was really trying to get the attention on the logo. And that was successful here, exactly in the reading direction. Of course, everyone's going to read the logo within a couple of seconds. You will have your attention on the logo. And therefore, if you have your attention on it, you will be able to recollect what you were looking at. Okay, but is it only information from the environment of these basic building blocks? No, there's more. There's also rules that also apply to everyone, and not those basic building blocks of our vision, but things that are socially relevant. Faces. The faces capture attention automatically. Whenever there's a face in the scene, you will see that your attention goes to that. And I don't like evolutionary psychology because it's storytelling and I'm a scientist. But evolutionary psychology will tell us that this is because faces 200, 400 years ago, whatever, longer, thousands of years ago, faces were important to us. And therefore, there is a brain area that's specifically designated in order to respond to faces. That's true. Those areas are there. This is for everyone the same, but there are also things that are very special to you. So I'm going to put a spider on the next slide. So for people who are afraid of spiders, you are... no, there isn't a spider, it's food. People are hungry, sorry. What I want to tell you is that if you're hungry, food automatically attracts attention. And if you're afraid of spiders, there it is. Spiders automatically attract attention. But this doesn't work for everyone else. For everyone, it only works for people who are afraid of spiders. And in terms of the food, you might recognize it when you're hungry and you're at a party, there's a plate of food going around. I don't know about you, but I cannot focus on the conversation anymore. It seems that my attention is traveling through the room, and I'm actually changing my position in order to run, in order to be able that the food is actually coming to me. So this might depend on the situation. So if you ask me, what are the 5 rules to capture attention? I cannot do it because it depends on the situation. It depends on the surrounding. Is my brand, is my logo, is my artwork, is that different from the rest? Depends on the rest. You have to know the rest first. And then, of course, you have to know what's the goal of the other person. Is the other person hungry? Is he afraid of spiders? Then you can, if you really understand the other person, then you can exactly make your message such that it is congruent with what the other person finds interesting. Of course, we also have control over our attention. We are not only slaves of our environment or about things that are hungry, but we also have control. If I now ask you to watch at the time, you can move your attention to your clock and you can notice the time. This is interesting, because this means that there's a competition. There's a competition between information in your environment that wants to capture your attention, and you have your goal and you have your intentions. This is a phenomena that's interesting because it so much shows the competition between bottom-up from the environment and top-down attention. It's called banner blindness. So in the old days, when in the HTML time period, banners always used to flash. And that's, of course, a very good idea to capture attention because flashing information is probably unique and it's extremely strong and able to capture your attention. These days, it doesn't work anymore. We have become so used to this flashing information. At the moment we visit a website and we see in our peripheral vision something flashing, there might be a small shift of attention, but you immediately go away from there again because you know this is not relevant. We have become used to banners. We have become used to that in information. And now these days, advertisement is placed at a situation where you immediately focus your attention on it. So for instance, hidden, somewhere over here, you see immediately that is where the advertisement is. You make your spotlight small, you focus on the content, and boom, that's exactly where the advertisement will be. So there's a continuous competition between people who want to capture your attention and you want to control your attention yourself. We shift our attention based on associations. brands invest a lot of money in order to create associations. So the brand on the left has invested a lot of money and time in order to be able to create an association with their brand. So the moment you're standing in front of the cooler and you're going on holiday to France and you're thinking about those type of cheese you want to have because you're going on vacation, you create an image, and what's congruent with that image will capture your attention. So think of red, and everything that's red in your environment will capture your attention. That's why you're standing in front of a bookshelf and you're searching for that one book. You think, okay, what was the color of the book? It was red. And then you don't have to search through all the books, but you can only search through the reds. And of course, this can be copied. And any lawsuit that started will be lost because, hey, there are enough differences between these two packages. But of course, yeah, the damage is already done. The association is already there about the circle and the specific composition of this picture. So attention is also based on our goals and our intentions. And something you do not expect will not capture your attention and will therefore all not become conscious. So this is a very famous example in the Netherlands by the Koentunnel. The Koentunnel, what they did is they placed a barrier on the road. There's nowhere in the Netherlands there's a barrier on the road. We don't expect a barrier on the road. So what happens? I can show you, and you know what's going to happen. There's a bike rider. He is almost there to the barrier, and he will hit it. Of course, he's seen it. His sensors has been projected on it. But there are no barriers on our roads. We don't expect them. We're looking for other stuff. We're not looking at things that are static and are stable on the road. And they've tried everything. They have tried everything to make this extremely salient. And I have to admit, of course, 99.999% of the times it goes right. But once every month, once every 2 weeks actually, there's a car or a bike rider that's hitting the barrier. Because you're not expecting it. The only way to solve it is to put barriers everywhere on our roads. Then you might at least expect barriers to be there, but we don't expect them. So most of the times, sometimes there will be a bike rider that's actually missing it, based on our expectation. We shift our attention not only based on the content of our environment, but also what we expect to appear. Our brain is hypothesis-driven. We make hypotheses about our environments all the time. And that's how we shift our attention around. So you can roughly distinguish between two types of attention. The reflexive attention is really quick, survival. It's bottom-up, it's from the environment, it's fast, it's stimulus, it's automatic. It's the same for everyone. And then there's top-down attention, which is slow, which is associated with goals you might have, and is a very ugly term, free will. But this is where if you want to shift your attention, then that's what you do. And these are in competition. And this means the fact that top-down and goals differs between people means that every one of you will shift their attention differently compared to the person that's sitting next to you. And this means that you can be together with a person in a room, and it doesn't mean that you will pick up on the same information. That can differ between people. And you also know that from perception. I can easily demonstrate this by dividing the room up in two groups, and I can ask you to think about rabbits, and I can ask you to think about a duck. You know what's going to happen, but we know it works. So let me illustrate that perception differs greatly on the situation. So you think about rabbits, you think about ducks. What do you see? The idea is the group that thought about a rabbit now sees a rabbit, and the group that thought about ducks now sees a duck. And if you were in the other group, that will be the other way around. So how you interact with your environment and what you get from your environment differs from the state that you're in, things that you've just experienced. So for the people who have a hard time here, and the funny thing is you cannot see both at the same time. So for me it's always difficult to explain because I'm now in the duck modus. And the duck modus means that I'm seeing the mouth here, and if you are in the rabbit modus, you're seeing the ears here. You all know this one. But this depends on the situation where you're in, and you cannot see both at the same time. So you either see one interpretation of the rotation, or you see it the other way around. If you have difficulty seeing it, you have to imagine that you can see the one leg as going in front, or as going like the other way around. So from off the other leg. So does it go this way or this way? And that's the ambiguity here. And this you cannot see both at the same time. But that perception changes. These are other examples. The fact that we have ambiguous stimuli, that our perception is ambiguous, and that what you get from the world might depend on the state that you're in. So that doesn't mean that two persons looking at the same picture might experience the same thing. So we study this competition by a technique we call binocular rivalry. And binocular rivalry is a very interesting situation, and one of the artists that's coming next to me has a very interesting and very beautiful installation based on this idea. And binocular rivalry is an extreme situation of competition where you present different information to both eyes. And now, what does the visual system do? Normally, that doesn't really occur. So what normally our eyes see roughly the same thing, and you only have to do is you have to combine the input. And we don't really normally realize we have two eyes. What we see is that the fact that that's a combination. That's a sort of a formation of these two percepts into one. But what now happens through a mirror setup or virtual reality or whatever, you present different information to one eye to the other eye. Well, when I first heard this, I thought you will see a blend. You'll see these things that are sort of merged and blurred into each other. Well, when we do this in the lab, we actually see something else. We see a competition between the two eye percepts. So if for instance, the right eye is presented with red information, the left eye is presented with blue information, you sometimes see red and you sometimes see blue. And you see this transition between these two eyes. Somewhere in your head, there's a little system, we can call it little man, homunculus, however you want to call it, that makes the decision, okay, now I've seen the information, you have been presented with that information from that eye long enough. What we're going to do is we're going to shift the perception. So the eyes see two different things, but you, as a person, are projected with one of those two images. And that changes. And there have been studies, brain studies, that have presented houses and faces to different eyes. And that was a brilliant study, because what we know about houses and faces is that we have different areas in the brain coding for that. So you could look at brain activity associated with houses and faces. And you can see whether our house area or our face area reflects what you're seeing with your eyes, or what's in your mind's eye, what is projected to you. And I won't go into detail, but fMRI experiment has showed that actually varies with what you see, not what your eyes see. And I'm sorry about the dualistic approach here, but this is the best way of explaining it. If the dominant percept at that moment is a house, you see larger activity in the house area compared to the face area. If now your perception changes and the other eye becomes dominant, the other way around, then your face area becomes more active and the house area is not that active. We study this in the lab because we think it's a great way to understand visual awareness. Because there is apparently a system in your head that determines for you when information from the other eye becomes conscious. And we can study this. We can see what type of information does that. So we do this in a technique called breaking continuous flash suppression. Let me explain that. The breaking is the breaking of the percept. So when the other eye becomes dominant, breaking through the other eye. And what we do is in the other eye is we present a mask, which is a continuous flash and therefore suppresses information from the other eye. So this is information presented to the one eye through a mirror, and this is information from the other eye presented through a mirror. This is flashing all the time. It's like Mondrian figures which are really strong and which are flashing. Of course, that's very strong. So what will happen is you will see this, although this is fully present in the other eye. It's strong. You are not aware of it. And your percept will also reflect this. So this is what your percept will be. It will be that dominant flashing thing. But while we're flashing it, over time, about 2 to 3 seconds, you will see that this information breaks through the mask. So you suddenly see this green thing appearing. And we measure the time, how long it takes before that information becomes aware to you. This is what we call awareness. We are not philosophers, so we have to come up with a way of measuring awareness. And this is the way we measure awareness. Because there is the two types of information, and we now just wait how long it takes for you to report this information. So participants have to indicate whether the information is on the right or on the left. And we do this in a mirror setup. And we can do really cool tricks with it. We now can study sort of the rules of visual awareness. What is the visual system set to? So one of the things we found, you can do this with faces, but we don't like these faces because it's difficult to control their the visual properties. So we always use very simple stimuli. because we know exactly how bright they are and we can control the brightness. So one thing we did is we have associated thing. This is the only scientific slide, by the way, which has data, but let me explain. This is the 3 conditions: memorized, unrelated, and discarded. This is the response time to that stimulus. And what I mean with memorized, we just simply ask people to remember a particular color of red. And we tested them afterwards. Did you really remember that color? What we did in the meantime is we did a little trick. And we investigated how long it took for that red information to access awareness compared to blue. So you have to memorize red. Red is in your working memory. It's important to you. You're thinking about red. It's a working memory. It's our central executive where all the important information is. And now you see this red information in the other eye. This is probably relevant to you. So what will happen is red will break through faster compared to blue. So whenever you're in love and you're at a party and you know that the person you really like has a red dress or a red t-shirt on, everyone that enters the room with something red on will automatically capture attention, as we've shown here, will therefore also become earlier conscious to you. And this is a way of blowing up that very small time that you have in normal life. But we think this transitions to the normal life. And what we just did is we have blown up the effect by creating competition between the 2 eyes. And we know things that are associated with a shock break through this mask quicker. Things that are associated with a reward. If you get money in that particular condition, if red is associated with a reward, red breaks through quicker. So we're doing all these tricks, and we think we are trying to find these rules about what type of information you give priority. I've been almost only talking about the visual domain, but because that's what we study in our lab. But we know that these same principles also hold for other sensory systems. So for instance, all this filtering that we do for visual information, we also do for auditory information. You notice when you're talking at a party and you're talking to someone, you're able to listen to that stream of auditory information. But these things combine, right? We combine information from all the senses. In order to explain this, I would like to explain to you the McGurk effect. And the McGurk effect is a situation where, well, let me just show you, and then I'll explain afterwards.
Ba, ba.
Okay, this is him. This is not Mr. McGurk, but somebody who tried it. And just look and just let it go.
Ba, 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 ba.
Okay, now close your eyes or look someone else. Do not look at this person.
Ba, 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 ba.
What happens is that you now are in conflict. You're seeing something else that you're hearing. And what happens, you are combining that information. Did it work? To show it again, it works really quickly. You just have to look peripheral and then to the mouth, peripheral and to the mouth. And now realizes what this person is saying with his lips is not the sound that he's producing. That's in conflict. But hey, we are merging that information. We are combining that information.
Ba, 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 ba.
So what's happening here? So we have a situation where the lips say ga, the speech that you hear is ba, and your perception, so the combining of that information is da. Hopefully this worked. Normally in lab situations, this is an extremely strong effect. And that's what people do when we are at a noisy situation. We look at someone's lips and we use that information, because this is of course not what normally happens. Normally this is congruent. This is the tricks in experimental psychology that tell us how this works. And people that have a hearing disorder, or if you are at a party where it's really crowded, we know that this effect becomes really strong, because we tend to focus then on what the lips are doing, and we are combining that information. So everything I'm telling you will be mostly told in terms of the visual domain, but it works for every sensory domain, and therefore we also combine that information. Because we have to make sense of the world around us. We see colors everywhere, but we name certain parts of the spectrum. We have given them different names in order to make up. Like if you're listening to someone, you cannot you cannot perceive 2 things at the same time. We have to categorize the world around us. And if we categorize the world around us, if you have to say what's a specific color, you use all the information that you might have in order to put that thing into one box. Even though it's noisy, even though it may not be a perfect resemblance of the prototype that's in your head. I try to speak as clearly as I can, But it might be that my words come out very differently than the perfect way of saying it. But you can deal with that. You can use that information, and you can deal with that noisy information, because we have to make sense of that world around us. And that's why also with our vision, we can use, and we can cope with very noisy vision based on our intentions, based on the knowledge of the world that we have. We integrate that knowledge, and that's determined what you will see. So yes, we have great sensors around us. Our eyes are beautiful, our eyes are perfect. But they have to deal with a noisy environment. And therefore, we use all the knowledge that we have in order to make sense of the world around us. So what happens if you focus your attention somewhere? I've talked about the spotlight, and I've talked about spotlight being important in order to know what's out there, in order to get identity. So if I ask you to tell me how many of these object elements have an opening on the top right, you cannot do that at once. What you need to do is you need to go with your spotlight from one place to the other. So you're focusing your spotlight here, then here, then here, then here. You can do this quite quickly, but it takes time. It's a serial process, one by one. So this means that when you don't have your attention on something, you do not know what it is. So you need attention in order to get identity. And this might sound abstract, but think about what this means. This means that at any given moment in time, assuming that you can only shift your attention to one location in space at a time, you only know from one object in your world what it is. And the rest is simply a combination of some colors and some shapes, but you have no identity. I can shift my attention there. Somebody might change their color of their shirt. I won't be able to get it because I don't have my attention there. So there's a cat hidden here. And if I don't have enough content for this talk, I can wait just as long until everyone has found it, because it takes forever. So here it is. So what you now do is you shift your attention on this location, and you combine all the individual features at that particular location. And then, yes, that is when you see the cat. If you don't have your attention there, you do not know that there is a cat. So if you're walking through a forest, you might have the impression that you have a rich visual world. Well, one of the important things I would like to be able to tell you is that that's not the case. Only where you're focusing on your attention, then you know that's a tree. The other things can easily not be trees. They can be telephone poles or whatever, looking like a tree. But the only way of knowing it is by shifting your attention on it. So your world, the perception of your world, is really limited. It's only limited to one object at a time, and the rest is just colors and shapes, but it's not identity. And this solves a problem. This solves the binding problem in the brain. So our world has a lot of colors, has a lot of shapes. So it doesn't normally look like this, but let's assume it looks like this. So here we have something red. I'm a little bit colorblind, so I'm going to say this is red. It's a red square and a red circle. So I told you about the visual system. We've got a red area, color areas, and shape areas. What now will happen is red neurons will start to fire, and circle neurons will start to fire, and square neurons will start to fire. How does the visual system knows which color belongs to which object? Well, there's no problem here, because there's only one color in the two objects. So the visual system will see a red square and a red circle. But now let's make it a little bit more difficult and more similar like our world, is now we have two objects which have a different color. You see a red square and a blue circle. Red starts to fire, blue starts to fire, circle starts to fire, square starts to fire, but in different areas. You've got different brain areas coding for these individual features. How does the brain know which color belongs to which object? That's the binding problem. How to be able to bind these individual features together? Well, the answer is attention. What you can do, what you normally do, is you focus your attention on only one object, and that's the object that gets priority. And now only red starts to fire really hard, and square starts to fire really hard. And the only thing that the visual system has to do is look at which individual neurons are firing really hard. And then it knows that it's looking at a red square. Do we have evidence for this? Yes, we do. What you can do is you can do an experiment and present information really short. Not long enough in order to shift your attention around. So like 13, 14 milliseconds or whatever. And what you now can do is you can ask participants, okay, what did you see? Wow, that was short. I saw a yellow square. You get illusory conjunctions. You get illusory, the fact that they're not really there, but because you've got all these floating information, all these floating feature information, it hasn't been binded yet. So what you then see is you are combining different information. you haven't been able to really get identity information because you haven't been able to shift your identity. So the refrigerator light is always on. If we have the impression of the rich visual world around us, this is due to everywhere we look. Yes, it's rich. Yes, it's rich. Yes, it's rich. But it's not rich. If you're focusing on attention there, that's a rich visual world. But you have no idea of knowing what's happening at the other locations. That's the same thing as checking the refrigerator on. It's always on. Because the way of checking it, in order to know that the refrigerator light is on, is by triggering that. And that refrigerator light is always on. Shifting your attention around, everywhere you look, that's a rich visual world. But you do not know how not rich it is at other locations. In the last couple of minutes, I would like to be able to talk about eye movements, because I've been talking about this spotlight. And if you're at King's Day in the Netherlands and you're searching for your friend with an orange hat, good luck, what you will do is you will shift your attention. You will do that by making eye movements. Now, why that's the case is because we can only have sharp vision with our fovea. And a fovea, if you stretch your arm, it's only a thumb width. It's not really that sharp. That's sharp vision, but it's not a lot. With the peripheral vision, you are able to detect changes and rough colors, but you aren't able to get a very high acuity. So if you want to inspect something with high acuity, what you want to do is you want to shift your fovea around. That's why we make eye movements all the time. 4 times a second, sometimes even more, we move our eyes around. And attention and eye movements are therefore highly linked, and I believe that they're actually a common system. Whenever you're shifting your attention, you're preparing an eye movement and the other way around. And you can now determine by computational models where attention and therefore the eyes will be going. So this is a computational model that you can look up on the web. It's by Itti and Koch. It's a very famous model. And what you can do is you can feed it an image, and then it will compute based on everything I sort of told you about individual feature maps that are combined into one saliency map, and that is the intended location. You can only shift your attention one thing at a time, because it's a winner-take-all model. So this image is fed to that model. What you will see is that things that are salient will receive high activity and would therefore be attended first. This model knows nothing about the world, doesn't know this is a face. It only knows about features, it only knows about colors and shapes and orientations. And based on this, it can predict where the attention and therefore all the eyes are going. This has no knowledge about the world. If you have no task, this is a quite good correlation, quite good reflection of where eyes are going. And there's a revolution in eye movements. This eye tracker costs $200. It's really good. The eye tracker that I used for my PhD thesis 10, 12 years ago was €30,000. It's really good. It's better than this one. But if you want to know where somebody's looking, you can use this. It's called the Eye Tribe. And we ordered a lot of it because, hey, you can give it to students. That's wonderful. Hey, just measure eye movements. If you break it, don't mind. We got 20 of those. Then we got a message from the company that they didn't sell them anymore. Like, oh no, this was really good research. A couple of days later, we got a notice that they were bought by Facebook. So what's going to happen is that and we can already see the patterns going. They will use these eye trackers, but also the cameras that are in your mobile phone, in your tablets, and your laptops in order to measure eye movements. We can already measure eye movements by using webcams. Webcams are able to pick up on heart because they can measure the beating of the heart by looking at the color changes of your skin. So webcams will be able to get a lot of these simple biomedical information. So there are a lot of different eye trackers, and I won't be able to show this, but and of course you can use it in advertisement. But we can also do it in real life. This is something I'm very proud of because we can actually show that the stuff we do works in real life as well. So we have some sort of Google Glass on. It's by a company called Tobii. And we are able to track eye movements in real life. And we can see all the things that we've learned from the lab. So you can see the automatic capture of attention by faces, by where somebody else is looking. All these things are now reflected in the environment of our daily life. So the last thing I want to do is I want to see whether you've actually paid attention. So I want to do a magic trick. I'm an amateur magic person, so let me see what I'll be able to do this trick here. So I want to influence your mind. So I want you to look at this. On the next slide, there will be 6 cards. And I want you to pick one, really quick, and remember it. Then I will show a next slide, and that card will be gone. Okay, so think about this. This will influence your behavior, nudging. Okay, so here's the next slide. And I want you to pick one card. Memorize it. Is it gone? Did it work? Why did it work? They're all different, yes. So these are the 6 cards. This is an actual magic trick. So these are the 6 cards, and as you will see, the one thing from your environment is what you focus your attention on. And if everything else changes, you have no idea. So the only thing you need to do is have the attention on something, on someone, and you can change the world around you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Stefan. First, did you notice that somebody was crossing the stage during your...
No, because I don't have eyes in the back of my head, but it actually...
Did anybody notice that?
Perhaps
Yes.
it was sneaking. If you, of course, things that are sneaking, do not.
I'm just
open
taking the
capture
piss. Nothing happened.
Oh,
Just-
really?
I don't think so. I just saw bananas flying, but I'm in therapy for that. There is an opportunity for you to ask questions. Here is a very curious person that has a question. Opportunity for you to ask questions. Yip is with you, yeah? Yeah. It is actually on, but...
Okay, I'll speak louder.
Yeah.
Yes?
When I was growing up, people were worried about subliminal advertising.
Yes.
Does it work?
No, subliminal advertisement does not work. The famous Coca-Cola thing, or eat popcorn, did never happen. It was one of the first scientific flaws ever. The whole experiment was never done. So you cannot influence behavior by presenting subliminal information. 2 exceptions. Really quick. So if you present subliminal information, people don't know what we're talking about. Subliminal information is information that is suppressed. If you
Really
ask,
quick, was it? Like, it was like one frame
One
of
frame.
like a Coca-Cola bottle,
yeah,
yeah?
one frame.
So-
One frame. And if you then ask immediately after, what do you want to drink? It might work, but only when people are thirsty. So it has to be congruent with the goal that the participant have, and they replicate the experiment with a sort of gum that made people really thirsty, but it doesn't work a couple of seconds later on. So there was actually a famous advertisement by during the Bush promotional for him to become president. It was against Al Gore,
Yeah.
and he was Democrats, and you can see the word rats
Yeah,
appearing a little bit earlier, and they found out, we did it on purpose. Of course, we did it on purpose, but it would never work. Subliminal perception is not a problem in advertisement.
Okay.
Don't worry, your minds are not tricked.
We think.
Yeah, we hope.
Yes, but Trump is a president. How did that happen?
Yeah,
Anyways, is there another question from the audience? Yes, there's one here.
Your examples are mainly on a flat surface.
Yeah.
But what about 3-dimensional questions? For instance, in theater, stage right used to be the villain showing up. Is that psychological or just an agreement?
That's probably not something that is innate. So it's something that that we have become used to, and if you expect things to happen, if you associate certain regions of space with a certain situation, then that's of course a congruent situation. So I think, at the top of my head, I think that's probably not something that has to do with how the brain is wired, because if everyone tells you that the right brain is different from the left brain, please laugh, because it's complete nonsense. Both hemispheres are doing roughly the same things. There are no right hemisphere person, no left hemisphere. That's all not true. But we do know that based on associations, you can have these things really quickly, and we do know that you can shift your attention in 3D space as well. So I guess that's where it's coming from. Based on association, we associate certain regions with space on a theater, then perhaps with certain characters.
Okay. We're gonna swift to. Oh, but there's one more question here. Last question here.
Do you think our visual awareness, how it works, changed over time by how the world has changed, or that it will change even a lot more by the technology that's developing?
That's a very good question. Evolution is never that quick that we're now growing up with, like everybody's using it, is looking at the smartphones all the time. And that's a huge problem. There's an attention crisis, right? We aren't able to concentrate long enough, but we can gain that back. That is possible by training. And I do not think evolution is such that within 20 or 100 years the brain will be wired differently. That's not how it works. But it is a problem that if you do not train it at a young age, a person growing up without long periods of concentration will not be able to concentrate when this person is older. So it's not a wiring problem, but it's a training problem. And I think it's very important that we think about this and have people aware that I'm talking about visual attention, but of course visual attention is a crucial factor for staying concentrated. If you focus on something and you're easily distracted, if you increase your spotlight very easily or whatever, that's a situation where you cannot concentrate. So you might be thinking about, hey, this was a talk about attention, I'm going to learn about concentration. This is the prerequisite for concentration. And you have to be able to get your spotlight long enough in order to be able to train to do that long enough. And everyone who writes or wants to be creative recognizes that if you haven't done that for a while, it's very difficult to get it back. And that's something I think is very important to raise some awareness of. We still have that capacity. Everyone can do it, but we need to train it.
Most people are doing a really good job today with all this information. Mamma mia. That's very Dutch thing to say. Anyways, I want to thank you so much for the and also for your attention and giving us the attention and your attention on attention. Thank you so much, Stefan van der Stigchel.